Welcome to Democratic Television, a program of the Santa Clara County Democratic Party that brings insights, perspectives, and attitudes of our always thoughtful Democratic guests. Today we're joined by Assemblymember Rich Gordon, and I look forward to interviewing you again. We've had you on before, but so much has happened in your relatively brief career in the Assembly.
Glad to be back.
You're on your second term.
Correct.
One more to go. Term limits have changed, but that was after you got elected, so it doesn't impact you. But you're having a great time, I assume?
I'm enjoying it.
Yeah?
It took me a while to kind of get into the flow of the work and to really understand how to be most effective. But I feel like I'm hitting my stride now that I'm in my second term, and look forward to continuing to do the good work.
Well, you came from a public leadership background. You were on the Board of Supervisors in San Mateo County for a number of years, a few terms. Very different. 5 people making decisions. Frankly, not a long drive to get to the office.
Right.
How was that? I mean, did that prepare you well for the Assembly?
In some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. So the yes side of it is that it exposed me to a whole range of issues. County governments deal a lot with health and human services. Yeah. They're a subunit of the state for the delivery of these things. So the many issues, I feel like I had some good grounding and was prepared. What I wasn't prepared for was the difference in process. At the Board of Supervisors with 5 people, you only need to get 2 others, to make something happen.
Yeah.
And the pace is much slower. Things develop over time. There's time to work issues, time to meet with community groups, work things through. At the state level, things move at a very rapid pace. There's 80 members of the state assembly. I got to get 40 others to agree with me to get something done. So the process is very different.
So, but the issues, I mean, local government deals with, as you say, health and human services. You don't deal with education. You deal with law enforcement to a degree. But yeah, there's so much you don't have to deal with at the local level, and you just have a few phone calls to make to see if you have not a consensus, a majority.
Yeah.
Well, so you decided to run for the Assembly. You left that pond to go to a much larger pond. We hear that it's very fractious in the state Assembly and in the state Senate. Maybe not like Congress, where they're seemingly always at war. Are you able to get stuff done, do you feel, even though the context is different?
Yeah, I do feel like I've been able to get some things done. As I look at Congress, I see complete dysfunction. In the state legislature, I see partial dysfunction. I do think in the last year there have been several more moderate Republicans elected. I think there's more of a willingness to talk across the aisle and to try to work collaboratively on some things. But that's rare, still rare. There are some core central issues upon which we just definitely disagree. The Republican Party and the Democratic Party are never, ever going to see eye to eye on the woman's right to choice. We're going to be very different on some of the immigration policies. Going to be different on our relationship to gun policy. So there's some fundamental ways in which we're never going to agree. And in California, we now have Democratic majorities in both houses of the legislature. We have a Democratic governor. We are able to move some of these progressive agendas forward.
Well, that is an important point. We do have a new governor, a governor who I think is very pragmatic, idealistic, but pragmatic, and has some long-range vision, and yet wants to get stuff done. Do you have a relationship with him, or can one have a relationship when it's 120 persons in the legislature?
I don't have a personal relationship with him, but he certainly does reach out and work to connect with members of the legislature. This year, at the beginning of our legislative session back in January and February, he and his wife hosted every member of the legislature, Republicans and Democrats, to small group dinners. We had an opportunity to have some discussion with him. I do periodically see him, obviously, in the hallway. Cordial, friendly, but he's not somebody that I sit down and have a glass of wine with on any kind of regular basis.
Well, that probably would be somewhat impractical, at least for one of you.
Yeah, exactly.
The legislature just ended, and there's been some enthusiasm for some of the legislation and some concern about some of the other stuff. Immigrants and undocumented residents of California now have the ability to get driver's licenses in, I guess, most circumstances. That wouldn't have happened a while ago. In fact, it didn't happen. It was something that's been fought over in the legislature for many years. What changed to make that finally happen? And are you enthusiastic?
Yeah, in this particular year, the governor got on board. That made the difference. This piece of legislation had stalled and was not moving forward until the last week of the legislative session, when in a casual conversation, the governor said, I'm so upset that the federal government isn't doing anything about immigration. What can we do?
Oh.
And the folks behind the driver's license legislation said, well, take a look at this, Governor. He said, yeah, let's do that. So with his interest and involvement, in the very last week, and last day actually, that bill moved forward out of the Senate, back to the Assembly, now sits on his desk. He has certainly indicated he will sign it, and it will mean that those who are undocumented here in this country, living in the state of California, will be able to get a driver's license, which I think is a very positive thing.
Well, and it seems to me to be a safeguard for everybody. I mean, because driver's licenses imply insurance, it implies taking the pressure off. How do you get to work? And
well, obviously, number one, we don't have folks who are driving illegally. We have folks who have gone through the process of getting the tested and demonstrating that they can drive. They know what they're doing. They've got the license and they've got insurance. So I think all that's very positive.
Yeah, good. Another positive measure was, from my point of view, Democratic Party point of view, was raising the minimum wage. I know that's something else that had been before the legislature, hadn't gotten anywhere. Did it help that it passed in the city of San Jose and, cities showed that there is public support?
Well, I think that the one thing that the San Jose experience was very helpful with was that there was no job loss. Because the argument in the past had been, you raise the minimum wage, jobs are going to disappear. Well, jobs didn't disappear from San Jose. And there's also this fear that restaurants will close. Well, San Francisco has a much higher minimum wage, and they don't seem to have a problem with restaurants closing in San Francisco. The restaurant industry is doing very well there. Those arguments were helpful. I think what had been the challenge in the last several years around raising the minimum wage was just the general fear that we had around the instability of our economy and how fragile that was. But with the economic rebound, I think Democrats certainly felt it was time to make sure to raise that minimum wage to help those at the lowest income earning levels, move them on up as the economy recovers. They should be able to recover also.
It seems to make for a stronger opportunity for people, maybe get closer to affording a home and other things, maybe not quite owning a home, but at least a step in the right direction.
We've had one of the real challenges in this region and in our country is the growing divide between those who have and those who do not, and the loss of the middle class. Raising the minimum wage doesn't necessarily move somebody in the middle class, but it helps move us along that path. Because we have to close that gap. We have to reinvigorate the middle class. That's what makes our country strong.
Yeah, well, I'm with you. Another bill that passed was something that allowed for more regulation on fracking, the whole process of extracting oil underground with new modern well, I don't know how modern they are, but new with technologies. I know it was controversial. What's your take on that?
Well, I voted for the bill that was adopted and that the governor signed. I would have preferred to have been able to vote for moratorium. I'd like to see
A straight up moratorium.
A straight up moratorium. Stop fracking until we understand its full implications. That wasn't possible. Couldn't get there. And so in the legislature, sometimes if you can't get purity, you get what you can get. And in this case, I think we got some good measures. We have the toughest fracking regulations of any state in the nation now under this law.
Because of this bill.
Because of this bill. So I think that's a step in the right direction.
Well, good. It seems to be something that's going to separate us from energy dependence elsewhere, but we want to make sure it doesn't cost
at the end of the day, we really need to have a much better understanding of the implications of fracking. We don't know yet. The bill requires some additional study, but we need to do more to understand what we're doing to our geology, to our groundwater. I'm not sure that this is necessarily a safe activity, and again, that's why I would prefer to have had a moratorium.
Well, we'll get what we can. Take it from there. The governor, pragmatic at times, visionary at other times, and assuming those are incompatible, I don't know, maybe not, has been pushing high-speed rail. The costs of that are either uncertain or seem to be quite high. It's something that's going to be impacting your district. What are your thoughts on how that's going to proceed? And
I don't think it proceeds.
Oh.
At least not in the next decade or two. We have allocated all of the available bond money for high-speed rail to 3 discrete activities in California, one of which is electrification of Caltrain, a great benefit to this region. And so that's very positive. But we've spent the money that was allocated for high-speed rail. We don't have more money in the state. There's no federal money coming in. There's no private investment. So I think it's a long time before we really go the next step to talking about how do we go to high-speed rail in California.
It sounds like a reality to me. Speaking of realities, we're going to take a little break right now. When we come back, more with Assemblymember Rich Gordon.
I'm United States Senator Barbara Boxer. Thank you for watching Democratic Television.
Welcome back to Democratic Television and our guest, Assemblymember Rich Gordon. Rich, we mentioned the budget is in place. It looks like there's some potential happening. A big area of importance to many Californians is the question of education and what is the state going to do? The federal government has its ideas. Of course, people at the local level have their ideas. What did you guys do to fix everything?
Well, particularly if you ask local school administrators and school boards, we probably didn't fix much. We probably made their lives far more interesting in the short term. But we made a couple of fundamental changes. One, we made a huge shift in the way we fund education in California. We went to what's called a local control funding formula. And what that does is it targets the neediest children, those who are in poverty, those who are English language learners, and it guarantees that more money flows to the education of those children. We know that they're often under-supported in the schools. Our funding has not tracked with them. And so we're really targeting funding now to the neediest. We did not take money away from anybody in the short term. Nobody's losing money. All schools got a little increase this year across the board. But over time, over the next several years, we'll begin to target money where it is needed the most to improve education. Coming with that was the end of a whole series of categorical funding It used to be that one of the ways state gave money to local school districts was we said, here's a category, you can spend money in that category. We eliminated 75% of the categorical funding streams and told local school districts, you figure out how to use the money.
So what are some examples of those categories that now are in the... So the districts can still respect those categories?
They can still respect the categories, and in fact, they have to prepare what's called an accountability plan to show us how they're kind of trying to figure out how to best use the money. There was funding for gifted students. There was funding, one of the categorical streams, categorical on busing issues, categorical on vocational ed, categorical on arts education. So a lot of these things, where school districts got small amounts of money, had difficulty spending it sometimes. Now they have a better capacity to figure out at the local level how to use these dollars.
So these will be decisions made by the local school boards elected locally.
Right. And hence the title of this program, the Local Control Funding Formula.
Well, that's exciting.
I think so. I think that at the end of the day, the governor is very interested, and the legislature is interested in returning power back to local school boards. We have the state has, over the last several years, usurped that power and kind of said, here's how we want schools run. I think that the state, from my perspective, should set broad goals. We want you to achieve to this level, but we shouldn't tell folks at the local level how to get there. There's huge differences in our communities, and we need to allow local school boards to understand and respect those differences, develop the education in a way that works in their community.
I know a number of districts have complained that there's such inequities in the per student spending one district to another, so this may help to get at some of that?
That's really what this is targeted to do, is to try to guarantee that all children have a good base, and those who need a little bit more get that. And that's really the goal of this program over the next several years.
Now, there's also the charter movement where folks are coming in from the outside saying we want to bring our own educational ideas, and to help fund our ideas or our programs, we want to take some of that money that was going to the public school and use it ourselves. What are your thoughts about it? Is that a good way to invest in communities?
Well, first of all, charter schools are still public schools, funded with public money. And so they need to be accountable, as all schools are. I think that the charter school movement has given us some good examples, some things that work. Now, not every charter school works. In fact, over the longer term analysis, it appears that probably a very similar success rate to the other public schools that are not charters. But there are some good examples, things to learn. We should learn from those. I also believe very strongly that it's really important that the local school board be the ones making the decision about charters and be invested in the charters, because I think that way you keep it connected at the local level, and I think that's pretty important.
I know sometimes we have processes where the local school districts are given a shot at making a decision, and then it's always appealable to the local county office of education's countywide school boards that may have a history of always overruling the local districts. And I know that's a source of frustration for districts.
Well, and that's why I understand how the appeal process is set up, but I really think that the more that we can leave these decisions in the hands of the local school board, rather than a county board of education or even the state board of education, which is another appeal level. And in general, education is delivered best when it's closest to the child in the classroom. And that means that parents, teachers, community members need to be engaged with local schools. So keeping charters local, I think, is very important.
Well, that's a major topic. Another major topic is healthcare.
You want to go for all the big ones.
Well, we're on the verge of the Affordable Care Act kicking in covered California. How is all that looking? Are you optimistic, given your background on county government and the primacy of healthcare delivery being so important?
Yeah, we're about to provide insurance to 3 million more Californians. There's about 6 million uninsured Californians at the moment. We're going to double, or at least get through 50% of that backlog very quickly as we moved into the Affordable Care Act. We've established the healthcare exchange where people will buy their health insurance under covered California. We're way ahead of other states in the nation in doing this. I think we're well prepared. It won't be without a glitch. I mean, you can't make this big a change without there being some kind of a challenge at some point. But registration, enrollment can begin in October. The whole program rolls out in January. So it's going to be a very interesting and exciting several months as we get more people into health insurance, get them covered, get them their basic care, and then roll out further from that to expand the net eventually. Our goal long term, candidly from my perspective, needs to be universal health care. I think that the Affordable Care Act helps move us in that direction, but we need to get, I think, eventually to just simple universal health care.
Well, I really appreciate California stepping up to the plate and leading on this. It's very frustrating to see what's going on at the national level, how this kind of healthcare is demonized. There's so much misinformation about it. I know we've seen phone bankers that have called people to see if they're interested, if they understand their eligibility, and after the folks rail against the government takeover of healthcare, when it's explained to them, suddenly they've done a 180-degree shift and they're very appreciative of this really important program.
Yeah, I think part of the national political environment is an effort to demonize our president and his healthcare reform. At the end of the day, this is going to be one of the best things we've done in this country. Mm-hmm. It is a huge change. It's an important change. It's the step towards universal health care. And I think people will find that there's nothing to be afraid of. They're going to see their doctor. They're going to be able to choose their doctor. They get to choose their health coverage. So, there's no choice taken away from people here. There's no government dictating how things get done. The government is facilitating the delivery of health care. I think that's a very appropriate role for government.
Do you think there's enough morality in government? And from that, I don't mean we say no to this, we judge you, and we tell you what to do, but are people in leadership roles driven by loftier aspirations to bring out the best in people? I say that given your background as a man of faith and your work in a nonprofit sector,
right.
And I see a relationship between those two.
Yeah, I think that the majority of the folks that I associate with in the California legislature, the vast majority, are there for very good reasons. They want to improve their communities. They want to make life better for their constituents. They want to see our children educated, and they want to see people in good jobs. Now, where we differ is how you get there. So I don't know that we disagree in many respects on what the broad outcome is. We want our state to be a better place for all people. I think Republicans and Democrats would agree to that. How we get there and how we achieve that dream for all Californians is where we may disagree at times.
Because of your background, do you find yourself having discussions with folks on the other side of the aisle? One of the things that's impressed me about you when you were a supervisor is that you were able to work with folks and work out problems, and that party affiliation wasn't as important then, or you kept your democratic values.
Yeah. I mean, my democratic values are really critical to me, and I'm not going to compromise those. But that doesn't mean that I can't have civil conversations and friendships with folks across the aisle. We may disagree on things, but we ought not to be disagreeable. And we ought to be able to find a way to communicate with each other. And out of that, there are moments where you can bring people along, bring people together, and make some things happen. I have had success at times by being able to go to Republicans that I developed friendships with and say, I need your vote on this. And they'll come along because of the friendship, knowing that they're skirting the edge of the party philosophy. So, I think that there's an advantage to us trying to figure out how to get to common ground. When we are at the extremes in our philosophies and in our approach, it's hard to govern. And I think you look at what's going on in Congress and you see people kind of hunkered down with their allies at the edge, and you don't see many folk in the middle. When you get more people moving towards the middle, you can move things forward. And again, it doesn't require you to give up your values. In fact, you can continue to affirm those within that conversation about what the common ground looks like.
Great. Well, Rich, thank you very much for being on Democratic television. I'm glad you're in the legislature.
Thank you. My pleasure being here.
Great. Thanks for watching Democratic television. Give us a call at 408-445-9500 or check out our website, www.sccdp.org, and help make a difference.